after the pyramids, the Saqqara Pyramid. The Step Pyramid, which is the first pyramid in history. It was built in the year 2700. The ancient Egyptians, they spent or devoted 100 years experimenting to build a complete pyramid. A pyramid with straight sides like this, without the steps or irregularities like the Step Pyramid. So over the course of 100 years, they built dozens of pyramids. Some of them were never completed. Some of them were slanted. Some of them, the foundations couldn't support them. So cracks appeared in the foundations. They collapsed. There were many experiments over those 100 years until they finally managed to build a complete pyramid. The first complete pyramid ever built was the Pyramid of King Sneferu. He was the founder of the 4th dynasty and the father of King Khufu. The view we're looking at right now is, of course, one we all recognize, the Pyramids of Giza. The first pyramid on the right is the Pyramid of Khufu, then in the middle is Khafre, and then Nak, and these are the pyramids of Menkaur's wives. The person who built the Pyramid of Khufu was the great architect Hemiunu, and we discovered his tomb near the pyramid. And this is the statue that we found inside the tomb. Yeah, this is, of course, in response to the people who say nonsense and claim that the pyramids were built by aliens or beings from other planets. That's absolutely not true, and the person who built the pyramid is right here in front of you, Engineer Hemiunu, an Egyptian engineer who looks exactly like us. He doesn't have 3 eyes or 4 ears. Egypt has more than 140 pyramids, but the largest of them is the Pyramid of Khufu, followed by the Pyramid of Khafre. And the most famous pyramids are the Pyramids of Giza. The Old Kingdom lasted from the 1st dynasty to the 6th dynasty, up until 2181 BC. And that was the end of the 6th dynasty. The last ruler of the 6th dynasty was a king named King Pepi II. Pepi II ruled for 99 years. He took over the rule when he was 1 year old under the guardianship of his father, and he was relieved of his duties under the guardianship of his mother and uncle. And he died when he was 100 years old. So he ruled for 99 years. As a result of Pepi II's long reign, things started to fall apart. The administrative systems and government institutions became weak during his reign. They became bloated and aged, just like the king himself. So by the end of Pepi II's reign, the country entered an era of chaos. During this chaotic era, the central government collapsed. The unity of the country was shattered. Each regional governor separated with his own region and declared himself a prince or king over his territory. And the great state fragmented into small, warring mini-states. This period is known as the First Intermediate Period, which includes dynasties 7 through 10. That era was extremely difficult. Some writings from that time have reached us. For example, one interesting text says that the prince, after once owning palaces and many golden furniture and a golden mirror, now he finds nothing but the surface of the water to look at his face when he wants to comb his hair. Security was non-existent. Thieves and gangs spread everywhere, digging and breaking into tombs, looting them. That's why nothing reached us. Very little has survived, just a small amount, a small number from the tombs of the Old Kingdom. And almost none of the bodies of the great kings who built the pyramids have reached us. At the beginning of the year 2055 BC, there was a very powerful prince in Thebes named Mentuhotep. It was Mentuhotep II who managed to reunite the provinces and bring all of Egypt back under his rule, wearing the double crown. And a new era begins, the Middle Kingdom. The Middle Kingdom was a time of prosperity and was distinguished as an era when agriculture flourished. The state was an agricultural one, Just as the Old Kingdom was known for building pyramids, the Middle Kingdom stood out for the advancement and prosperity of agriculture, the development of agricultural facilities that served farmers, and the control of water resources. And the pyramids of the Middle Kingdom were made of mud brick, and most of them, or almost all of them, were in the Fayum region. This includes the 11th and 12th dynasties. Unfortunately, by the year 1710, at the end of the 12th dynasty, the country falls apart again and enters a period of darkness, which is the Second Intermediate Period. The Second Intermediate Period lasts a bit longer. It covers the 13th and 14th dynasties up to the 17th dynasty. And during this period of weakness, Egypt became fragile and the country broke up into small states. Very powerful Asian tribes seized this opportunity. These were warrior tribes that invaded northern Egypt and advanced southward as far as Asiut, even reaching northern Sohag. This was the first foreign occupation of Egypt, and the Egyptians called them the foreign rulers. Hakka especially, or the Hyksos. The Hyksos Hakka means a special ruler. Kasud means foreigner, so Hakka Kasud turned into Hyksos. This is the Hyksos invasion, which lasted in Egypt for about 150 years. At first, the Hyksos tried to get close to the Egyptians and their gods, but soon they turned their backs on the Egyptians, rejected them, and began to persecute the Egyptians and look down on their gods. They built temples for the Hyksos gods, with Baal at the forefront, depicted in the form of a donkey. They disrespected the Egyptian gods and persecuted the priests. So, in the year 1550 or 1500, the Hyksos king Apophis, or Abuphis, and it's believed his name in Arabic is Abu Faz, sent a message to King Seqenenre, or Prince Seqenenre, the Prince of Thebes. In it, he was provoking him, saying, I am in Avaris, which was the Hyksos capital in the Delta, and Avaris today is Tel el-Dabe in the Sharqiya Governorate. He told him, I am in Sharqiya, or I am in Avaris. The sounds of the hippopotamuses in the sacred lake in Thebes are disturbing me at night and depriving me of sleep. So I can't sleep because of the hippopotamuses you have in Thebes, so kill the hippopotamuses. Of course, these hippopotamuses were sacred in the sacred lake, so this was basically a declaration of war. So, of course, Seqenenre realized. He was a brave and strong prince. He understood the intentions of the Hyksos, so he immediately began to gather his army and march north to confront the Hyksos and liberate the country. Yeah. King Seqenenre, we call him the Martyr King. And Seqenenre means that he gives me strength, or the power of the god Are. Unfortunately, he was brutally killed in that battle, the mummy of King Seqenenre, or the great martyr King Seqenenre. And we can see that it was mummified in a hurry, that's why, or in a rush. That's why we find that the mummification isn't excellent. The mummification is very minimal, or extremely weak. Here we see the king received an axe blow to his forehead, and this axe. That spot alone was enough for his brain to be scattered through it. And then he also took a spear to the other side of his forehead. Those 2 blows alone were enough to kill him. But unfortunately, the Hyksos enemies took revenge on him out of sheer spite and hatred. How could an Egyptian, one of their subjects, dare to rebel against them? So they kept hitting him even after he died, after he took his last breath. So here we see a sword strike under his eye. And here we see a gash under his right eye. There's also one behind his ear, at the back. Another axe blow, of course. Directly to a great king. This is a depiction of what he looked like when he was alive, wearing the blue crown. That blue crown. Only warrior kings wore it in battle. It's called the kepresh, or the blue crown. The war crown. King Seqenenre dies, and his son Kamos takes command of the army after him. Kamos also dies and is killed in battle, so after them, the youngest son, Seqenenre's youngest son, Amos, takes over. This is King Amos, who takes command of the army and leads the Egyptians in the war against the Hyksos. Amos chased the Hyksos north all the way to their capital at Avaris, which is now Tel el-Dabeh in the Sharqiya Governorate. He besieged it for a long time until they surrendered, and their remaining forces fled from the eastern border into Sinai, and he pursued them into Sinai. He chased their remnants in Sinai and pursued them all the way to Palestine. When he reached Palestine, he returned to celebrate Egypt's liberation, the dawn of a new era of freedom, the expulsion of the Hyksos, and the cleansing of the country from their traces. The ancient Egyptians destroyed and erased every trace of the Hyksos in Egypt. That's why we don't know much about the Hyksos, because we don't have information about them since the ancient Egyptians deliberately wiped out anything that could remind us of or point to the Hyksos. This is the mummy of Amos, and this is his statue. This is the battle axe, Amos' war axe, the actual axe he used in battle, and this is his dagger. We found them with his mummy. Amos started the 18th dynasty in the New Kingdom, also known as the Egyptian Empire, which spanned from the 18th to the 20th dynasty. This was the greatest period in the history of ancient Egypt, when Egypt was an empire. And when we talk about the Egyptian Empire, we have to mention the founder of the Egyptian Empire, the great king, or the king of kings, or the great emperor Thutmose III. Thutmose III is also famous as the smiling king because, as you can see, all his statues have a very beautiful smile. Even when we saw his mummy, it had the same smile. And this is a depiction of what Thutmose III looked like during his life. This is a map of Egypt during the reign of Thutmose III. As you can see, it stretches north to Anatolia in Turkey and reaches the borders of Iraq, even including the area of Mosul. A large part of the Babylonian Empire was included, as well as the entire Assyrian Empire, Palestine, Syria, Phoenicia, and it extended here all the way to the Libyan borders. And in the south, it reached into Ethiopia and the borders of Somalia. Thutmose built this empire through sweat and blood. Thutmose led 55 campaigns against the Levant and Ethiopia. Every summer, he would launch a military campaign in the Levant. And every winter, he would conduct a military campaign in Ethiopia. Thutmose was not just a great warrior. He was a brilliant politician. Follow the policy. It was the first time in the ancient world that anyone had done this. When he entered a kingdom and defeated it, he didn't. Eliminate the king or the prince of that kingdom. On the contrary, he would keep them in their positions and make them swear an oath of loyalty to him, so they would become his followers and remain loyal. Then he would take the king's children and bring them to Egypt. Yes, he would take the king's children, but not as prisoners. On the contrary, these children, of course, the children from all the kingdoms he conquered, as you can see on this map. He would bring them together in the military capital, Memphis, which is now MIT Rahina. He provided them with the best education available in ancient history, which was the Egyptian education. And of course, Egypt at that time was like Cambridge or Harvard today. It was the center of civilization and culture for the whole world. So he would provide them with a royal education in royal palaces and temples, raising them in the Egyptian way, teaching them the ancient Egyptian language, the ancient Egyptian religion, and the Egyptian civilization. This policy was very smart because, first of all, It guaranteed the loyalty of their fathers. Of course, since they were worried about their children, the fathers' loyalty was ensured and prevented any acts of betrayal. Their children were in Egypt. The second and more important point is that after the fathers grew old and died, or retired from ruling, these children would return to their kingdoms to rule, but under Egypt's control. And of course, they came back deeply influenced by Egyptian culture and civilization. So they became a very strong line of defense for the Egyptian empire on behalf of the pharaoh. This policy helped the Egyptian empire remain as Moses had established it for more than 100 years after his death. Even during Egypt's periods of weakness, like the era of Akhenaten when Egypt was at its weakest, to the point that Egypt couldn't even send armies to defend its possessions in Asia and Africa. Yet these princes and their sons remained completely loyal to Egypt and the pharaoh. The era of the empire, we see it, the 18th dynasty, and after the 19th dynasty. Of course, the 19th dynasty, during which everyone who ruled Egypt bore the title Ramses, with Ramses II, the great king, at the forefront. And the 20th dynasty, up until 1077 BC, which marks the end of the 20th dynasty. We see the third intermediate period, when a country falls apart and becomes prey to foreign invasion. The Assyrians invade Egypt during the Kushite invasion, which is from Kush, that is, northern Sudan. They invade Egypt. The Libyans invade Egypt. The Persians invade Egypt up until 664. 664. Then comes the era of the 26th dynasty, which we call the late period. The era of the 26th dynasty is considered a period of revival for the powerful Egyptian civilization and its refined art. The level of art during the 26th dynasty matches the very high, sophisticated standard that existed in the Old Kingdom. But unfortunately, this era doesn't last long. By the end of the 30th dynasty, Egypt falls prey to the Third Persian invasion. The Persians invaded Egypt more than 3 times as well. But in 332 BC, Alexander the Great enters, defeats the Persians, and liberates Egypt from them. And this marks the end of what is known as ancient Egyptian history. In the year 332, that is the beginning of the Greek era in Egypt, and the end of ancient Egyptian history, this division that we see here. The Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, modern, the late period, the 30 dynasties. We weren't the ones who made these divisions. It was Manetho who did that. There's something very important I want to point out. The word dynasty doesn't mean it's just one family, like a man, his son, his children, his wife, and his brother. No. Here, dynasty means a group of rulers. We don't really know why. Manetho grouped a number of rulers together and called them a dynasty. Then after that, he started a new dynasty. For example, after the 18th dynasty comes the 19th dynasty. So what is it? Why did he end the 18th dynasty and start the 19th dynasty? Sometimes we see that the last person in one dynasty is actually the son of the first person in the next dynasty. Even so, Manetho put one in one dynasty and the other in a different dynasty. We don't know why, because once again I remind you that we don't have the original book Egyptiaca. What we have are only excerpts from it quoted by Greek historians. And these excerpts don't mention why, or what were the reasons that made Manetho divide Egyptian history into 30 dynasties. And what was his method for choosing which kings belonged to each dynasty? In the end, of course, I thank Manetho, and we all thank Manetho, because without him, we wouldn't have known anything at all about this history, these great kings, and these tremendous achievements. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope that this episode. Oh, yes, it's good, and I hope you enjoyed it. 1,000 thanks.
Thank you very much, Engineer Tarek. This was a rich episode. There's a lot of information here that will take us some time to process and understand. I think anyone who watches this episode will watch it once, twice, even 3 times, because the amount of information in it is really huge. And we still have many questions about ancient Egyptian civilization. And that, God willing, will be the topic of our upcoming episodes. We'll talk about the Egyptian religion. We'll discuss the social structure or the social divisions of the Egyptian people. We'll talk about what made ancient Egyptian civilization stand out from other civilizations. There are many topics, God willing, that we'll continue to explore together here on Open Mind. Looking forward to seeing you all soon, God willing.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you all, and thanks to our viewers. I hope you enjoyed this episode and will join us for future ones. Thanks. Many thanks.